Hello and welcome to our August 7th, 2026 Freshet Friday podcast. And I will say, this is our 21st podcast. So that number just kind of blows me away. I just wanted to put that out there. And in this week's episode, we're going to look at the growing roster of candidates for this fall's civic election, why rookie MP Jake Sawatsky is introducing a bill to create a national suicide prevention strategy to replace Canada's current 12-point action plan, why New West is receiving more than $1 million in federal funding for gun and gang violence prevention, and how the Port Moody Park investment mystery was solved. And we have much more, including our regular sports, arts, what's on, and Freshet 911 features. I'm your host, Geof Wheelwright, and with me on the podcast this week are the veteran journalists and founders of Freshet News, Janice Clue, Teresa McManus, and Maria Bartel, with their take on all of these happenings in Burnaby, New Westminster, and the Tri-Cities. We're also joined today by the newest member of the Freshet News team, marketing consultant and a longtime fixture in the local arts and business community, Erin Jeffrey. Welcome back, team, and a particularly big welcome to Erin.
Hi, Geof.
Hi, Geof.
Hey, Geof.
Hi.
Well, maybe we can kick off by giving you, Erin, a moment to introduce yourself, what your role is, and why you wanted to join the wild expedition that is Freshet News.
Sounds great. So I've lived in New Westminster for the last 13 years and in the area, the Burnaby New West area, for the last 20 years. I have a fairly interesting and unique background that started out when I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting a few years ago. And then instead of being a waitress, I decided I was going to work in communications because I was really good at talking. So from there, I wound my way through a variety of places. And 10 years ago, I landed at the Massey Theatre, one of the largest and most fabulous arts centers in the Lower Mainland. Recently, my position with the Massey Theatre ended, but one of the things that I was always really passionate about when I was at the Massey was what happened when we lost our local paper. The local paper really was our best way of connecting with our audience. It's how we reached them. It's how we told them what was happening. It was how they felt engaged and part of the arts community that we were fostering. So when I left the Massey and the lovely Janice reached out to me about joining this amazing team, I couldn't think of anything better to do, because if I can help not only share the story of Freshet and get people engaged and excited about it, but remind people why local news is so important, and particularly independent and well-respected news media, to be able to elevate that and share that with the community. I just think that's incredibly important.
Well, so thanks for that, Erin. I really appreciate that. And now we're going to turn to this week's news, starting with the growing field of local election candidates. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. In Port Coquitlam, we have a candidate who has put her name forward. Her name is Dahara Thompson. She is a mother and she is a soccer player. She played for Newcastle United in England. She is running for a Port Coquitlam council seat, and she's also the executive director of the She Plays Sports Society. I also wrote about a former Anmore village councillor named Tracy Green, and she is running for a school trustee seat in Port Moody in this upcoming election.
In Port Moody, several people have stepped up in the past couple of weeks. More significantly, Megan Latty, the mayor, has finally officially launched her re-election campaign. She said she hasn't finished the job yet. She's just coming off her first term. Another interesting candidate is her former rival in the mayor's race last election, Steve Milani, who was a councillor in Port Moody at the time. He's decided to seek a seat on council again, so he's announced his candidacy. And a couple other people, a young man came forward, announced his candidacy on Tuesday, 27-year-old Sebastian Moon. He wants to try and enliven the younger voters and to get involved in civic affairs and learn about their city and the issues as well. So things are starting to percolate.
How about you, Teresa? Thank you for that, Maria.
New West is a little bit of a different animal. We have more of a slate system here. So most of those candidates have been announced for some time. So there's folks that are running for the Community First New West, the New West Progressives, and the recently announced Be Good New West. So no new candidate announcements have been coming out recently, but I am seeing that there's the folks are out there, they're pounding the pavement, they're attending lots of events, and there's a lot of door knocking happening. There are some policy announcements that are sort of being rolled out, and we'll be covering that more as we get more in depth into our election issues coverage.
Thank you for that, Teresa. And speaking of election issues, I want to turn to you, Erin, to talk a little bit about how you see the election issues that are going to be important to the arts community in the region.
If you take a look right now, a lot of people are concerned about the almighty dollar and where they're spending their money. And that particularly affects the arts community because the arts community relies on audiences. It relies on people to purchase whatever the art they might be creating. And so funding is always at top of mind. So there's always lots of conversation around the city of New Westminster and funding and grants, whether it be granting to particular arts organizations or looking at shifting the model to legacy granting, or even how the city takes a look at partnerships with arts organizations and what that may do to the arts community.
Yeah, and do you see that same concern being reflected with others that you've talked to across the region in Burnaby and the Tri-Cities?
Definitely. I mean, the arts are always on this kind of precipice of whether or not they're going to get support, whether or not they're going to get funding. It's either going to be government funding or are they going to get foundation funding? Are they going to see audiences in the Lower Mainland in particular? I'm speaking from a performing arts perspective because that's what I'm most comfortable with. But in the performing arts, we're competing with people going skiing. We're competing with people going to hockey games. It's an incredibly expensive area in which to live. And people deciding that they're going to spend money on going to a show might mean that they won't go skiing. So they're going to choose skiing instead. So these arts organizations are always incredibly reliant on funding and governmental support. And that really starts at a civic level.
Great. Well, thank you for that perspective, Erin. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Geof, also wanted to mention something. Freshet news reporters are looking at what to cover for the election, and we're calling for questions from the public. So if anybody wants to send us any questions for the school board or the civic trustees or anybody running for mayor, our deadline is August 10th, and they can send the questions to newsroom@freshetnews.ca.
That's great. Just to kind of prime the pump there, Janice, what kinds of things have you already got on your list? I can imagine housing, for example, is one.
Housing, the unhoused, mental health is a big one, and climate change. There are big ones in the Tri-Cities especially.
And Teresa, you have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, here in New West, we've received a couple of suggestions already. One of those was about climate action, particularly electricity demand. We had another one who was, about traffic. It was very specific to a specific street. So I'm not sure we'll get that one answered, but traffic is always a concern here in New West. And then, and the other one was about development and infrastructure, what we're planning on doing in the city to make sure that we have the amenities that folks need as the community grows. So the questions are rolling in. We appreciate any questions that folks want to send our way, and we'll do our best to put those to the candidates.
Fantastic. Mario, have you had any questions come to you yet?
Yeah, the ones I've seen so far have been mostly centered on the growth of Port Moody and how quickly the city's growing, and whether, like Teresa said, whether the civic amenities and services can keep pace, and the nature of that growth just seems to be foremost in voters' minds right now.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, I think growth and also the housing issues that are introduced by the province's mandate around housing also seem to be coming up quite a bit. So it will be fascinating to see what other issues people have to bring to our attention. So August 10th, newsroom at freshetnews.ca. Get in your questions. Okay, well, speaking of local politics and local politicians, I know, Janice, that Jake Sawatsky has introduced a private members bill to provide greater support for suicide prevention.
So 2 weeks after Jake got elected in New Westminster, Burnaby, and Millardville, he was lucky enough to win the lottery. In federal election terms, that means you get to introduce a private members bill, and you can present it on anything that you want. Jake had met a Ontario person named Joshua Bell, mental health advocate, and he has got some lived experiences on the suicide front, unfortunately. And he has been pressing for quite a long time to bring a national strategy on suicide prevention. In March, he introduced a House of Commons e-petition, which closed last month, and it gained 480 signatures. With this momentum building, Jake is now he's now consulting with people on the strategy and what it should look like for this future legislation. And he knows he's going to be allowed to speak on it this fall. So unfortunately, Jake has had some friends that have passed from overdose and from suicide. And this is a very, very important topic for him. Suicide is the 9th leading cause of death in Canada, and about a quarter of all deaths of Canadian youth aged 15 to 29 are by suicide.
Wow, those are shocking numbers.
Yes, strategy is needed, and Canada is the only G7 country without a national suicide prevention strategy.
Well, I'm glad he's introducing that, and we'll see what happens. Staying with the federal government, Teresa, you have a story this week about gang violence prevention and funding being provided by the federal government to the city of New Westminster for that. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah, the federal public safety minister was in town recently. He was at Dan's Legacy, Dan's Diner down on 11th Street in New West, and announced that the city of New Westminster would be receiving up to $1.04 million in federal funding for gang and gun violence prevention. This is a continuation of funding that had been in place up until March. Some folks may recall that there was delegations to city council, and there was an online request for funds to help keep a youth hub going in New West. So this is all part of that. And so the federal government is providing funding to New Westminster, and New West gets to determine how that money will be spent. But essentially the idea is to provide programming that will support youth and help keep them away from guns and gangs. In the past, funding went to Dan's Diner, which is operated by Dan's Legacy, the New Westminster Youth Hub, which is operated by the Purpose Society, and a youth situation table that the city had led, and it brought together 25 to 30 different service organizations that support youth. The funding is to be determined how it's going to be spent, but you can pretty much be guaranteed that some of those services will be continued because the numbers that Mayor Johnstone had cited were quite remarkable. The Youth Hub, for example, had been visited by 350 people, young people, each year. Dan's Legacy had supported more than 1,280 youth through 10,000 service interactions last year alone. And then, as I say, this youth situation table brought together nearly 30 organizations. So at the announcement, it was quite interesting because on one hand, you had the public safety minister who was speaking, and he had been a youth worker in his past. So he personally had experience of seeing how prevention could work. And then you had a member of the Dan's Legacy Board of Directors who's an inspector with the RCMP still, and he has seen how that worked. So there was really a lot of support for the whole notion of preventing young people from getting into a world of guns and gangs based on programming. And again, Janice had mentioned Jake Sawatsky. He was there as well. And he said he was very thrilled to be there because the very first time that he rose to speak in the House of Commons was actually about Dan's Legacy. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they allocate the funds. But by all accounts, it's going to go to good use and help young people in our community.
Well, thank you for that. Now we're going to turn to a story of an adventure, and it's an adventure that relates to the Fraser River. And Janice, you're going to tell us about it.
yet again, Finn Donnelly is going into the Fraser River. This is the third time he is doing this. And Mary and I remember Finn swimming the entire length of the Fraser River twice, once in 1995 and the other in 2000. And now that was to bring attention to the pollution in the Fraser River. Now he's talking about protecting the area and the habitat around the Fraser River. So what he's going to do this time around, he's not going to swim the entire distance. He's got a relay team to do that, as well as Indigenous people and people in canoes. And they're on Friday, they're going to have their official kickoff. They're hopefully going to brave the wildfires and go down the river. It's a 30-day journey. And they're stopping in Coquitlam on September 2nd. And in New Westminster, they'll pass through on September 3rd. This is part of the 30 by 30 commitment, and it's a global initiative of which Canada and BC have signed off on. And this is to protect 30% of the land, freshwater, and ocean areas by 2030. Currently, the Fraser River watershed, only 17% is protected. So this is a wonderful campaign, and it's bringing in a lot of Indigenous elements as well.
Well, it sounds extremely worthwhile. And thank you for that. I'm going to turn now to a mystery that Mario was on the case of. And you have a solution for us. It was all about Port Moody buying some land for a park. We knew the price, just under $10 million, but we didn't know where it was or any details about this park purchase. And you have the solution, Mario. So let us in on it.
Well, the sleuthing was really just opening up a press release. The city finally announced what it was doing with this nearly $10 million that was transferred out of the parkland acquisition portion of the development cost charges fund. It bought 4 properties on St. George Street, 4 residential properties right adjacent to Kyle Park. And the city's plan is to use those properties when the time comes to expand Kyle Park. This sort of comes all in conjunction with an ambitious proposal to build a new, much larger Kyle Center, community center, which is right at Kyle Park as well, and expand the park and kind of create a whole Kyle campus, they're calling it, right behind Pomo Arts. And the city, at its last council meeting, councillors discussed a request for more funding to do more preliminary work on the proposal. They also sort of let it slide that the plan for the new center is elevated to make it bigger based upon feedback they got from the community in a couple of rounds of feedback they've already done, and what people want to see in the center, and the type of facility they want it to be. So it's a big plan. We have some renderings up on our website if people want to have a look on the previous story and on the latest story, what the city wants to do with this. And the city's facing pressure because the Kyle Center is in Moody Center neighborhood, which is growing by leaps and bounds and will have even more growth as various development projects come online. They're trying to step up their game.
And are there any opinions being offered? I know that some of the local politicians in Port Moody were offering views on the fact that the process to get here was a little bit less than transparent.
Yeah, Councillor Haven Lurbecky, who's running against Mayor Megan Lottie in the civic election, she came out and said she wasn't comfortable with this much planning going on so close to a civic election. It's her contention that this council doesn't really have a mandate to push such an ambitious project forward, and would like to hear what voters think. And this council's going 4-year life cycles, and big projects like this can take a long time to be planned and funded, and ultimately go through various stages of development till they get to a final plan for what it's going to look like. So it has to start somewhere.
Well, much as I am disappointed that you didn't get to call a whole bunch of people into a wood-paneled library to get this information, I am happy to hear about it, and thank you for that story, Mario. We're now going to turn to our Freshet 911 segment, and I wanted to kick off by asking about a story coming out of Port Moody where there's an investigation about a shooting.
Yeah, on Saturday, Port Moody police responded to a gunshot call at Union Street and the Barnett Highway. It was in the middle of the afternoon, 2:40 in the afternoon, and they found a male victim there suffering from a gunshot wound. And witnesses told them that a silver vehicle had sped away, a silver sedan. And that's the last we've heard. We don't know what what's transpired. The Port Moody police said that it was likely a targeted incident, so they haven't expressed any kind of caution to the public that there's someone randomly driving around shooting people in Port Moody. But yeah, that's the last we've heard. We don't know what's going on since then.
Okay, well, and Janice, I saw you had a story about a Mountie getting hit at a roadside stop. Do you want to give us more on that?
This was on July 28th, and the Coquitlam CMP officer was talking to a speeder at United Boulevard and Maryhill Bypass, so it was in Coquitlam. This was at about 4:45 in the morning, and the officer had his lights on, pulled the car over to the road, and somebody else came around and clipped him and struck him so violently that the side mirror came off, and the officer went down himself. And the alleged speeder and came to his assistance, and the officer was taken to the hospital. But we've had a few of these where there's been warnings from the Coquitlam CMP and other jurisdictions where, make sure you slow down when you have a first responder, a tow truck, a roadside worker on the side of the road here, and they've got their flashing red, blue, yellow lights on, to really slow down, or else it could be quite a severe injury for the worker, and there's probably going to be a fine for the driver as well, $173. So this could have been a very bad accident. Coquitlam RCMP said it was just mere inches from becoming critical or potentially grave. Please drive with caution and respect when near any vehicle that is stopped on the roadside.
Yeah, no, that's such good advice. And, I can't imagine. So somebody's been stopped for speeding and the cop who's doing it gets hit by somebody else who was speeding. So yeah, it's just way too much speeding.
Especially that hour in the morning.
Yeah. What time in the morning was this again?
4:45 a.m.
Okay. Wow. So people not expecting that there's going to be a lot of traffic and maybe not paying the kind of attention that they should.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does remind me. I do remember as a teenager, I had a car that seemed to be a bit of a magnet for cops. It was a Datsun 240Z, if anybody wants to know. You probably didn't, but there you go. Anyway, I had this thing and I got a couple of tickets and I was getting worried about this. So I'm driving down the street and I look behind me and I see there's a cop car and I'm coming up to a light and I'm looking at my rearview mirror and I keep looking at this cop and I think, is he going to pull me over? And as I'm doing this, I drive through the red light because I'm looking at the rearview mirror and I'm so worried that I'm going to get pulled over. So of course he did pull me over and he said, "Why did you do that? You saw I was behind you." And I said, "I know, I saw I was behind." Anyway, so, yeah, you need to pay attention. Anyway, completely off topic. Sports. Mario, what have you got for us? I know the Coquitlam Junior Reds are on a playoff run, and I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, they're in a playoff for the BC Premier League Junior Division right now. They finished tied with Wally atop the league's regular season standings. But more significantly, the team is also hosting the Western Canadian Under-18 AAA Baseball Championships in a couple weeks' time. And they've been kind of gearing their whole season towards that. It's sort of the culmination at that level of baseball. And, it kind of dovetails with a couple local kids who have signed major league contracts in the last year. Sean Duncan and Tim Piacentin have both been drafted by Tim by the Toronto Blue Jays. Sean Duncan, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, drafted by the New York Yankees. So this baseball seems to be having a moment, as it does from time to time. There's been a steady trickle of major leaguers and potential major leaguers from the Lower Mainland for several years. But it's suddenly converged on the Tri-Cities, and here's these two kids and this tournament. So yeah, in yesterday's edition of the Freshet News newspaper, we have a bit of a story previewing that and talking to Wes Taylor, who's in charge of the Reds program, and Rene Tassoni, a former major leaguer who lives in Port Coquitlam. He's a firefighter currently. Had a one season stint with the Minnesota Twins back in the day, and he's now serving as the director of player development for the Reds organization and does some scouting around the Lower Mainland. And just bent their ears a little bit about what's happening out there for player development, why this area suddenly is getting attention and sending players on to the next level, whether it's college or minor pro or signing major league contracts. And Rene, especially since he's played in, I think it was 2011, he played in the major leagues. He said, yeah, the kids these days they're better trained. They have more resources available to them for things like nutrition and training programs, exercise programs, and they're a lot more skilled than even 15 years ago. They're getting better coaching, and he said a lot of that is to due to some of these players who've gone on to college careers and pro careers coming back home and giving back to the game, and like himself, getting involved with youth baseball and giving the kids the tools to take their game as far as they can.
Yeah, that's great. It's going to lend something extra special to anybody going to watch that.
Yeah, the tournament runs from August 14th to the 16th up at Mundy Park, which is a beautiful venue for baseball, just surrounded by tall trees and just lovely there. It's usually in the shade, so it's not going to be super hot if the weather gets hot, and it should be some good, high-quality baseball.
Great. Well, I look forward to that. And now I'm going to turn to Janice, and you got a bunch of stuff for us. So let's start with your arts update.
Starting August 7th and running for 10 days until the 16th, we've got the Art Outside Festival in Port Moody. This is the second annual festival, and it's site-specific. And it's all disciplines. It's performance arts and installations, dance. There's a piñata making, lots of good things for kids, and some movies. And that is in conjunction with the Port Moody Arts Center, the Pumo Arts. Also, early August is my favorite time of the year. And this is because I get to report on the SFU Pipe Band. There's about a dozen musicians, pipers and drummers from the Tri-Cities, New Westminster and Burnaby, but it is actually a bigger band. And they all head over to the Glasgow Green every year, and they perform in the Worlds. The SFU Pipe Band has won 6 times. Last year they won 4th position, I believe. And they're always sort of, in the top of the 12 or 13 international teams that they've got going. I did speak to the society president, Rob McNeil, and he said this year is really different because they've got a new pipe sergeant, because Jack Lee has retired, and they got Craig Sutherland coming in, and they sound very tight. So good luck to the SFU Pipe Band.
Wow. Well, that sounds like another exciting adventure for them, and who knows, maybe more championships. And what's on this week?
Friday is On Front in New Westminster. This is a presentation from the downtown New Westminster BIA, as well as the Douglas College. That runs from 6 to 10. I understand tonight they're going to be running some kind of Latino theme. We've also, in Coquitlam, we've got the city concert at the Town Centre Park. Andrew Johns is going to be doing a tribute to Elton John, and that runs from 7 to 9 tonight, Friday, at Town Centre Park in the amphitheater. That's always a really good crowd. On Saturday in Burnaby, Blues and Roots Festival, we've got the headliner Talk coming in. He's won a few nominations for Junos and has won a Juno as well for Breakout Artist of the Year in 2024. And on Sunday in Port Moody, we've got a cultural performance, and this is a Korean traditional mask dance, live music, the Mayan dance, and there's 2 performances, 5:30 and 7:30, and that's at the Inlet Theatre in Port Moody.
So a busy weekend ahead. Well, now I'm going to turn to our favorite stories of the week, and I'm going to turn back to you, Janice, to kick us off with a cool story about Belcarra.
Belcarra councillor Joe Elworthy was kind enough to send me a story tip regarding the mayor and council had sent a letter to their twin sister city in Ireland, Belcarra in the County Mayo, congratulating them on the football win that they had last month, and that they had broken the curse of this Mayo football club. And that stemmed back from the 50s. when apparently the club had interrupted a funeral for a priest and he put a curse on this club. Guess what? They finally broke it. This story has broken international news. There's been congratulations like Joe Biden and Mark Carney. They both have ties to County Mayo. And basically, Belcarra is named after someone who owned a village, and he was a lawyer in New Westminster. And so the partnership is legit. It was named after his hometown. And so they've continued, the village council's continued with honoring their ties to the Irish community.
And did they have any advice on removing curses on sports teams? Because I can think of a few sports teams who seem to be cursed.
Yes, perhaps it connects.
Exactly. Get somebody over from Ireland to come and help remove the curse. All right. Well, on that note, who else wants to go and talk about their favorite story of the week? All right, Mario.
Well, I love Janice's story about the Gaelic football and the Belcarra connection, but I want to talk about a story that got away. And I took my son to see The Odyssey a couple weeks ago on its opening day. We went to the IMAX theater in Coquitlam, and it was a matinee. And there was a little line to get in, and there was a woman at the front of the line who was very nervous, and she couldn't get her phone, the tickets come up on her phone. And she was having the person who was checking people in to help her. And she said, and she was a diminutive older woman, she said, "My daughter is the stunt woman for Matt Damon in this movie."
Oh,
and
right.
I didn't think anything of it at the time. But then, like the next day, this huge story broke of Devin Dalton, who's Vancouver-based, being the stunt woman in some key scenes in The Odyssey. And I've been Googling madly ever since, trying to find out if there actually is a Coquitlam connection there, because her mother went and saw the movie in Coquitlam. But yeah, it's one of the, journalists were always on the lookout for stories, and stuff happens, and sometimes you just kind of goes in one ear, now that you don't think of it. This was one of those things I paid attention right at the moment. I could have broken that story worldwide, but I did not. The movie's great, by the way.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that. And I did see that story where the woman was talking about, yeah, that's my biceps on the screen you're seeing, which I thought was very cool. All right. How about you, Teresa?
Oh, it's a tough week there, Geoff. I mean, whether we're having cursed sports teams, or I know that Liam Robert Scott, who has been doing some work for us, he did a story about Catterday, which is an event that's happening in Burnaby, and the descriptions of hissing cats and no dogs allowed was pretty entertaining. But I think I'm going to go for the second time in a row with Cornelia's series that's running about the divide, that the highway that was built through Burnaby. The second part is running in this paper that's just come out on Thursday, and it's also available online. And it's such a well-researched story, so well written, and she's got a lot of information packed in there. There's some interesting photos, and this is all about a neighborhood in Burnaby, Broadview, that really got wiped out in many ways by the highway. And anytime you can have a story that's got calling kids of the neighborhoods urchins is up there in my book. So I do know that when we had started out Freshet News all those months ago, one of the things that we had talked about was providing space for us to do some of the work that we were no longer being able to do, when we were just online solely, and it was like cranking out copy and writing about, businesses opening and closing. And so this story really, as many of those center spreads have done, is just a great opportunity for us to really sink our teeth into things and to talk about some of the stories that would otherwise maybe go unwritten.
Yeah, that was a great story. In fact, that would have been on my list too. But you got there first. Anyway, my favorite story of the week was actually one of Teresa's, and it was about what's happening in New West at the new waterfront park. So there's been an expansion to Westminster Pier Park, and it includes an outdoor fitness area, ping pong tables, picnic tables, and more than 100 new trees. So I want to go check that out. And you provided me with information about that I otherwise wouldn't have had. So thank you for that. That wraps up another Freshet Friday podcast, but we'll be back soon. I'd also like to invite all of our listeners to pick up the latest print edition of Freshet News, which came out yesterday. Get your copy at your local grocery store, drugstore, coffee shop, rec center, mall, or wherever you normally get the paper. In the meantime, keep asking yourself the question, is it Freshet Friday yet? And come on back when the answer is yes. Thanks to our team for being here. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.